In early 2025, Tom Cruise received news that would shake his world and himself to the core. Known for fearlessly defying death on screen, he now faced a diagnosis he couldn't outrun. Behind closed doors, the action hero broke down, revealing a side the world was never meant to see. Fragile, human, real. The breakdown no one saw coming. It happened quietly. No press release, no flashing cameras, just a whispered halt on a film set in a remote corner of Europe. The headlines hadn't caught up yet, but Tom Cruise had stopped everything. Production was shut down. The crew was told to pause indefinitely. At first, people assumed it was creative differences, maybe scheduling issues. But those on set knew something was off. Cruise didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply walked off set, pale and shaken, staring into the distance. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, one crew member recalled. Like something had finally caught up with him. Days later, the truth surfaced. During a routine physical, doctors found something troubling. The man who had outrun explosions, survived free falls, and held his breath for 6 minutes underwater had finally come face to face with something he couldn't control. Privately, Cruise broke down, not in front of cameras, not in a press junket, but alone, in a hotel room that had once been filled with scripts, training gear, and stunt plans. Now, it was silent. "I'm not invincible anymore," he reportedly said to a close friend. "I always thought I was." It was a sentence that hit harder than any stunt. Because for 4 decades, Tom Cruise had been Hollywood's unbreakable force. He was the man who laughed in the face of gravity, who outran aging by sheer force of will. But now something inside him had cracked. The world didn't see the breakdown, but those closest to him did. There were fewer late-night script sessions, fewer training montages, and more moments of stillness, of staring out windows, of rubbing his temples, of letting the silence speak. "He's always been about momentum," one longtime assistant said. "If he's not moving, he's not breathing. But now, he's still." The diagnosis would change everything, but even before it was official, Cruise knew. His body was trying to tell him something, and for the first time in a very long time, he was finally listening. This wasn't a stunt gone wrong. It wasn't a movie flop. This was real, and it demanded more than a comeback. It demanded acceptance. The mask of control, the armor of certainty, it all fell away. And underneath, there was a man grappling with something he had trained his whole life to avoid: vulnerability. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because what came next wasn't just a diagnosis. It was a truth that would shake his entire identity to the core. The diagnosis that changed everything. When the results came in, there was no dramatic reveal, just quiet voices behind closed doors, a few test results, a diagnosis, and the weight of a future rewritten. Tom Cruise had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder, a condition affecting joint function, stamina, and muscle response. Not fatal, not headline-grabbing, but for a man whose career was built on physical mastery, it was a slow-motion collapse of everything he had built. "He lives in his body," said one medical source close to the situation. "It's not just a vessel for him. It's his brand, his identity, his power." The doctors were gentle but firm. No more high-speed motorcycle chases, no more rooftop jumps, no more hanging off airplanes. They recommended moderation, maybe even a long break. but moderation has never been in Cruz's vocabulary. "You're telling me to stop being me," he reportedly said. "I don't know how to do that." The news wasn't about pain. Cruz has lived with pain for years. He's broken bones, torn ligaments, dislocated joints, all in the name of cinema. Pain doesn't scare him. Losing purpose does. He didn't scream, didn't argue, but something in him went quiet. That scared his team more than anything. For a man whose energy was contagious, the silence was chilling. Behind the scenes, he began pulling back. Training sessions shortened. Rehearsals became hesitant. His stunt team, long used to adrenaline-fueled intensity, noticed the difference immediately. He winced more, sat more, and for the first time, rested between takes. It was like watching a superhero realize he's mortal, one crew member said. He wasn't breaking down physically. He was breaking down emotionally. Cruz had spent a lifetime proving the impossible was possible. But now, he was facing something he couldn't outrun. Something that couldn't be filmed or fixed with reshoots. And yet, he kept it quiet. No social media posts, no tearful interviews, just quiet recalibration. A man confronting the terrifying question, if I can't be this, then who am I? For Cruz, this wasn't just a health scare, it was an identity crisis. A redirection he never asked for. But the next chapters of his story would reveal something even deeper, that the man who once defined invincibility was about to face the one enemy no script could save him from: time. A life built on control, now slipping away. From his earliest roles, Tom Cruise built his legend on one thing: control. He controlled his image, his narrative, his stunts, his dialogue, sometimes even the lighting. Nothing was left to chance. That control wasn't just professional, it was personal. It was how he survived in an industry that eats its icons alive. But now, something was slipping. The autoimmune diagnosis wasn't just a threat to his health. It was a threat to the very foundation of who he believed himself to be. It wasn't just about losing stamina. It was about losing certainty. Tom doesn't do chaos, a former director said. He's never let life surprise him until now. On set, things changed. Slowly at first, then unmistakably. He started pulling back. Fight choreography sessions went from hours to minutes. He asked for more padded mats. He rested between takes, sat down, something Cruise never did. He was quieter, more internal. The intensity was still there, but it flickered now rather than roared. His crew noticed. He used to rehearse until we begged him to stop, a stunt coordinator shared. Now he was asking, "Can we try that again tomorrow?" Between takes, he'd rub his knees, stretch his hands, and occasionally stare at them, as if willing them to obey. His body, once his greatest tool, had become unpredictable. And for a man who prided himself on precision, that was terrifying. Worse than the pain was the powerlessness. Tom had always been the guy who could fix anything with discipline and grit. But this wasn't a role he could train for. This was life, unfiltered. And that scared him more than any high-rise jump ever could. The mask, the one built over decades of red carpets and billion-dollar box office, began to crack. He wasn't falling apart. He was facing himself. A man whose empire was forged in motion now had to be still. And in that stillness, the fear came rushing in. Not of death, but of irrelevance. "If I can't do it all, will they still want me?" he reportedly asked a confidant. "Will they still believe in me?" For the first time, Tom Cruise didn't know how the movie ended. And that uncertainty was about to force him to confront a truth he'd buried for years. Behind the smile, years of pushing past pain. To the public, Tom Cruise has always been a machine. The charming smile, the electric energy. The man who ran through every scene like he was chasing time itself. But the truth is, he's been running from something for years. The pain. Insiders now say the autoimmune diagnosis only confirmed what Cruise had long been hiding. Chronic injuries accumulated over decades. Bruised vertebrae, torn tendons, reconstructed ankles, dislocated shoulders, dozens of fractures. He downplayed them all. He didn't want sympathy, said a former stunt double. He wanted silence, so the myth could keep breathing. On set, he'd power through grueling 18-hour days, then quietly ice his knees in a trailer. Painkillers? Rarely. He didn't trust them. He feared they'd dull his instincts, something he couldn't afford when his life was literally on the line. Since Mission Impossible, Fallout, it became a ritual. Finish a rooftop sprint, retreat backstage, ice both knees, pop his shoulder back into place, tape his ribs. The crew saw him wince, but he'd wave it off. "Let's go again," he'd say, gritting his teeth. "We got it halfway there." Every injury was a debt, and Tom kept paying it, because for him, every stunt was a promise that cinema still mattered, that real mattered. But the human body doesn't care about legacy. The final warning came during an overseas shoot, when a simple stunt, a jump he'd done dozens of times, left him doubled over for hours. Cruise said he couldn't lift his arm for days. He tried to push through, but this time, his body refused. "We saw him sit down," a grip remembered. "Not pretend to rest. Just stop." Behind that trademark smile was a man stitched together by discipline and denial. He wasn't fearless. He was exhausted. And now that the pain had a name, there was no more hiding. For the first time in his career, Tom Cruise had to reckon with a truth even he couldn't outrun. That even the strongest legends have limits. And what came next was a role he never imagined playing. Vulnerable. Facing the one role he never wanted to play. Vulnerable. For 4 decades, Tom Cruise played heroes who never blinked. Fighter pilots, secret agents, soldiers stuck in time loops. The man on screen always found a way, fast, fierce, and flawless. But off-screen, in the quiet shadow of his diagnosis, Cruise was forced into the one role he never wanted, vulnerable. He could fake fear for the camera. But real fear? Real uncertainty? That was uncharted territory. The man who built his empire on running now found himself standing still, watching it all catch up. "I don't know who I am if I can't run," Cruise reportedly said in a leaked voicemail to a friend. "That's not just a line. That's my life." Running had become more than a stunt. It was his signature. It was how he chased the impossible, how he outpaced time, aging, expectations. And now, even walking without pain was becoming a challenge. He didn't want pity. He didn't ask for comfort. But for the first time, he let people see the cracks. His voice softened. His temper, once sharp under stress, grew quiet. There were moments where he looked lost, not as a performer, but as a person. Crew members who had worked with him for years said it was like watching a lion learning how to be still. He was always the one telling us, "Push harder, go again, be fearless." Now, he was the one sitting in silence, listening, He started asking new questions, not about camera angles or fight choreography, but about purpose, about meaning, about what came next. Because if he wasn't the man hanging from planes and jumping from rooftops, what was he? That was the fear that lived between takes, that lingered in his dressing room, that followed him home. Cruise had always been about perfection, the perfect take, the perfect stunt, the perfect legacy. But now, the perfection was out of reach, and what remained was something he didn't recognize: fragility. He was no longer just a performer. He was a man confronting mortality, not in a movie, but in real time. And somewhere in that fear, something beautiful began to happen. He started opening up to old friends, to estranged family, even to crew members he once kept at a distance. He asked questions, listened more, cried quietly, behind closed doors. "It's not weakness," he whispered to someone on set. "It's truth, and I don't know why I ran from it for so long." The man who played heroes was finally becoming human. But the world still demanded more. Because when you're the last of your kind, there's no graceful exit. The pressure of being Hollywood's last action star. At 62, Tom Cruise isn't just a movie star. He's a dying breed. In an era of CGI spectacles, green screen backdrops, and digital stunt doubles, Cruise remained the last man doing it for real. Hanging from planes, scaling cliffs, driving motorcycles off actual cliffs. No wires, no cuts, just raw commitment. "If you're gonna do it for real," he once said. "Otherwise, what are we doing this for?" That philosophy made him a legend, but it also trapped him. Because now, with his body pushing back, that same standard was threatening to undo everything. Insiders say studio execs began panicking after his diagnosis. Insurance teams hesitated. Legal departments got louder. Even longtime collaborators urged caution. But Cruise wouldn't hear it. "They don't come to see me pretend to run," he reportedly said. "They come to see me risk it all." That mindset built his career, but now it was becoming a burden. The weight of expectation, the fear of letting down an audience that had come to expect the impossible. He wasn't just fighting illness. He was fighting the myth of himself. And it was exhausting. He kept training, kept pushing, but privately, friends say the toll was mounting. His movements slowed. Recovery took longer. The bruises didn't fade like they used to. He was in a race against time, and time was finally pulling ahead. "We begged him to use doubles," one producer shared, but he said if he wasn't all in, then what was the point? That stubbornness, once his superpower, now bordered on self-destruction. Because Tom wasn't just an actor anymore, he was the last man standing in a genre that had moved on, and deep down, he knew it. He saw the writing on the wall, not in reviews, but in his own reflection. The gray hair, the sore joints, the quiet moments between scenes when he'd just stare at the ground. He didn't fear death. He feared fading, becoming a footnote in an industry that once built temples around him. "I just don't want to disappear," he told a friend. "Not like this." So he kept going, not out of ego, but out of responsibility. To his fans, to the crew, to the idea that movies still mattered. But with each passing day, the pressure grew. The legacy loomed, and the reality that he couldn't carry it forever began to settle in. Because when the last action star starts to slow down, It's not just the man who changes, it's the industry. The private call that brought him to tears. In the middle of all the noise, the diagnosis, the rewrites, the quiet slipping of control, Tom Cruise made a phone call that no one expected. It wasn't to a director, or a producer, or his agents. It was to his daughter, Suri. Now in her late teens, Suri Cruise has lived most of her life at a distance from her famous father. Their relationship, shaped by years of tabloid speculation and family separation, had always been complicated. But that day, something changed. He called her, not as a star, not as an icon, but as a father finally realizing that some things can't wait. "I want to be there," he reportedly told her. "For once, I need to be there." The call was private. Only a few insiders knew it happened, but those close to Cruise say it left him shaken in a way no stunt ever had. For years, he had poured everything into his career. The training, the travel, the total immersion in being the man the world expected. And in the process, the one role he'd kept on pause was the one that mattered most: Dad. That phone call wasn't about apologies, it wasn't about explanations, it was about presence. A longtime friend revealed that after the conversation, Cruise sat alone in his trailer for nearly an hour. No script in hand. No calls, just silence. At one point, someone walked past and heard him quietly weeping. "I think he realized he couldn't rewind the tape," the source said. "But maybe he could still show up for the ending." It wasn't easy for him. Vulnerability never had a place in his world, not in training, not in press tours, not in the blockbuster machinery that ran on his relentless drive. But this was different. Suri didn't ask him to change. She didn't demand anything. But Cruise, for the first time, began to want to be different. Not just for himself, but for her. The diagnosis had shaken his body, but that call, it shook his soul. It reminded him that legacy isn't just box office numbers and death-defying stunts. It's the moments that don't get filmed. In the weeks following the call, Cruise became more introspective. He asked fewer questions about cameras, more about time. Time lost. Time left. Time he didn't want to waste. "She's strong," he reportedly told a friend. "She doesn't need me to be perfect. She just needs me to be there." It was a simple truth, but for a man who had spent decades living in extremes, it was revelation. Tom Cruise may never be the world's most visible father, but in that private moment, he chose to show up not as an action hero, but as a man, as a father, as Tom, not the myth. And that shift? It would ripple into every decision that followed, including one that could mark the end of his most iconic run. Will Mission Impossible finally end with him? For nearly 3 decades, the Mission Impossible franchise has been more than a series of action films. It has been Tom Cruise's cinematic altar, the place where he tested his limits, rewrote the rules, and dared Hollywood to keep up. From jumping out of planes at 25,000 feet to scaling the Burj Khalifa, Cruise turned every mission movie into a public dare. Watch me do the impossible again. But now, for the first time, the mission may truly be impossible. Not because the stunts can't be done, but because his body can't keep up. Insiders say Dead Reckoning was meant to be his magnum opus, the grand finale that would cement Ethan Hunt in the pantheon of untouchable film icons. But in light of his diagnosis, that plan is now uncertain. Insurance companies have started to raise red flags. Cruise's condition, though not terminal, introduces too many risks. The stunts, the travel, the intensity. All of it adds up to one chilling reality. He may no longer be insurable at the level these films require. If he can't jump, the movie doesn't work, a Paramount executive reportedly said. That's the brand, that's the legacy. Writers have been told to revise future scripts, tone down the physicality, add more ensemble scenes, shift the danger away from Ethan Hunt. But Cruise wasn't having it. "If I'm not all in," he told producers, "I'm not in at all." That refusal wasn't about ego. It was about principle. For Cruise, every Mission movie has been a covenant with the audience. Real stunts, real sweat, real stakes. To cheat that now would be to cheat everything he built. But the pressure is mounting. Studios are already eyeing potential successors. There's talk of a spin-off, a reboot, even the idea of a new agent stepping in. Cruise hates all of it, because Mission Impossible isn't just a franchise to him. It's a metaphor for his own life. A man constantly defying gravity, expectation, and time. And now, the very thing he used to outrun all of that is the thing that's forcing him to stop. He's not afraid of ending it, one close friend said. He's afraid of ending it without meaning. That's what's at stake, not just a role, but a farewell. If Mission Impossible ends, Cruise wants it to end his way. Not quietly, not digitally, but with fire, emotion, and one final leap that says, "This was real." And if he doesn't get that, he may choose not to end it at all. Because for Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible has never been just a film. It's been his fight against time, and time is starting to catch up. A legacy etched in pain, not CGI. When people talk about Tom Cruise, they mention the blockbusters, the billion-dollar box office, the ageless face, the death-defying stunts. But what they don't always mention is the pain. Because behind every slow-motion sprint, every motorcycle chase, every rooftop leap, was a man breaking himself for the belief that movies still mattered, that the audience deserved truth, even if it came at a cost. And it did come at a cost. Cruise has broken ribs, shattered his ankle, bruised his spine, and ruptured tendons doing what most actors would never even attempt. He hung from the side of a flying cargo plane. He held his breath for over 6 minutes underwater. He jumped from cliffs with no backup plan, just faith in gravity and training. He gives everything, one longtime stunt coordinator said. Not for the cameras, for the crowd. Unlike many modern stars who rely on CGI, Cruise insisted on real stunts, real risk, real emotion. It wasn't about showing off. It was about conviction. The belief that film should feel lived in, not manufactured. No green screen can replace heart, Cruise once told a young co-star. And heart is the one thing they can't fake. But that kind of commitment leaves marks. Not just physical ones, emotional ones. Missed birthdays, long stretches of isolation, friendships strained under the weight of obsession. A family life that never quite got built the way he imagined. He carried it all, quietly. Most of the world saw the legend, the suit, the smile, the movie magic. But those closest to him saw the ice packs backstage, the limps he tried to hide, the sleepless nights after pain flared so badly he couldn't lay still. He lives in a constant state of recovery, one source said, but he never complains. He just gets up and goes again. That's the legacy Cruise leaves behind, not just box office success, but sacrifice. He didn't just act in action films, he redefined them. He didn't just preserve the genre, he became its most faithful soldier. And now, as his body forces him to step back, there's an eerie silence that follows. Because when the pain finally forces the camera to stop rolling, what remains? For Cruise, the answer might not be found in the number of films he's made, but in the belief that he gave everything, not just to be remembered, but to be felt. The final act, and the question that haunts him. As 2025 unfolds, Tom Cruise finds himself at a quiet crossroads. The offers are still there. The scripts keep coming. But something has shifted. He's no longer sprinting toward the next mission. He's standing still, reflecting. Spotted in public without his usual grin or entourage, Cruise appears subdued, a man rethinking everything. Insiders say he's begun asking a question that terrifies him. Who am I without this? For decades, Cruise gave everything to his craft: health, time, relationships, fighting gravity, age, and irrelevance. But now, with his body pushing back, retirement whispers louder. Some say he may step into directing. Others fear he may simply walk away. But Cruise doesn't know how to stop. Not fully. He's not afraid of being forgotten, one co-star said. He's afraid of losing the mission to inspire, to prove that real effort still matters. Maybe this isn't the end, but a new chapter. Time with family, time for self. A final mission, but on his terms. "I'm not done yet," he reportedly said. "But I am thinking differently now." This isn't weakness, it's evolution. Because the man who always ran forward has finally paused. And in that pause, he's facing something even more powerful: himself. As cameras fade and scripts pile up, Tom Cruise now stands at a crossroads, grappling with identity, legacy, and the cost of invincibility. The man who gave everything to cinema may be facing his most powerful role yet, himself. And maybe, for once, the mission is not to run, but to heal.